Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Charmed. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, and I think this is going to be a continuous theme this season, because obviously it played a big part in the show. I figure it played probably the biggest role in season one was the whole balancing act of trying to be a witch and, the human realm, like they're living a daily life along with everything that's going on, especially under these circumstances of, okay, got to figure out what our situation is while also trying to balance like our normal lives, especially figuring out the issues in our respective lives. You have Mel dealing with the fact is that the dean is kind of like, whoa, you kind of went around, like kind of went behind my back and did the whole book thing. It's like, well, yes, but technically I'm adding it as extra credit, so it technically doesn't mean I kind of went against the syllabus. But it's like, okay, you should read this book. It's already pre-approved from like last year or whatever. It's like, okay, I thought that was interesting and weird that you would basically, I feel like something's off with that Dean situation. Maybe there's going to be more to that, but it's like, oh, let me push this book that I wrote. It's like, oh, yeah, it went through all the verifications and stuff like that, but then also like, it's a thing of like, oh, this book was, for one, written in 2013, so a lot of the stuff and studies back then don't reflect what we know now about, everything transgender related. So, but it's just like, in particular, that the dean would push her own book like that seemed kind of like, I don't know, just seemed nasty in its own right. Then I'm like, what the hell is that about? But then you have Maggie, who's trying to figure out, like, they have that like assignment they have to turn it into like a 1 week, and it's like she's trying to figure out what like her thesis thing was going to be, which she's struggling to because Antonio shows up and it's like, oh, this is what mine's about. And it's like, oh, you've got it all figured out, Then Macy's dealing with the fact is that, hey, I am trying to figure out this whole cure situation, but also apparently Julian left me safe space, which obviously Miss Swan's like, oh my god, this is awesome, like I have all these ideas, and she's blowing up Macy's phone. So it's like, she's like, I'm literally trying to find a cure for our allergy situation, and I don't have time to balance like taking care of like a business full time in this. Mel's like, you know, if anyone can do it, you can. Hell, even Harry's got his own issues because now it starts coming into his head of like, right, technically there's an age gap between me and Macy. Like he never really realized it until he started cracking jokes, and it starts hitting him and starts messing with him a little psychologically, because it's like, Mel was like, oh, you need to get with the times if you're going to start dating a younger woman. He's like, right, because it never crossed his mind before. It's like, yeah, he stopped aging the moment he became a white lighter, but it is still the circumstance of you are from like forever ago. You're from the early 1900s, so it's understandable that like, I think that's something her, and it sounds interesting because I was like, I never thought about that before. I don't even, like, if you remember, let me know. I don't remember if that ever came up between Piper and Leo. Because obviously, like, Macy and Harry's relationship obviously being a reflection of that, but like, I don't remember that ever coming up about, because Leo's from World War II as well, if I remember correctly. I could be mistaken. Or was it World War I that Harry was from? Harry was in the military, right? I think so. I'm blanking on a lot of stuff. But I swear, like, because I remember that being a storyline where ghosts from Leo's past came at the home. I think he was from I think he died in World War II initially, I think. But like I said, I don't remember that ever coming up. Maybe there was something to tackle that, but I just thought it was so interesting. It's like, because I never thought about it. I mean, it's a thing of like, but also later on when Jordan brings up something, it's like, oh, you'll kind of be willing her around. It's like, that's actually a sad thought. Like, you will outlive Macy. Like, you're a white lighter, you're going to live forever, which that could be a potential storyline of him eventually giving up being is there a way? Well, you'd assume there would be, but I'm wondering, is that going to be something they tackle this season, or is that going to be a later storyline of him potentially giving up being a white lighter? But it's like, by being a white lighter, he's able to protect them, but if he wants to have a life with Macy, just a normal life, potentially them having kids and stuff like that, if that's what Macy wants, then that's something that he would have to. I think these are building blocks potentially to that storyline, but I don't know. That's just kind of what's going through my mind. It's like, oh, it just got me thinking about stuff I'd never thought about before, and I think it's going to get them thinking about something they never really thought about before. So, like I said, a lot of everyone's got their own issues to deal with. Even Jordan, working at the law firm, doesn't know how to tie, a Windsor knot. But it's like he has to fit in because for him, it's like these are all these, he's at a firm where like it's mainly white people. It's like, dude, I'm a 6'4" black dude. These people know each other from private clubs. I used to be a private in the army. Like there's just that disconnected. Like this is kind of a world I feel like I don't fit in, but I'm trying to fit in. But the whole conversation is, don't try and fit into the mold, kind of find your own answer, your own rhythm through things, kind of fitting a little bit elements of the episode. But some other interesting things that kind of came up is we have this new monster popping up named Omen. Interestingly enough, played by the actor who played Philip in Traveler. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. Another interesting thing, too, is, really quickly, we'll focus on Omen. I thought he was an interesting monster because apparently, like, he's based on Narcissus from mythology, which maybe I'm mistaken. Like, maybe it's someone else from mythology, but isn't there some mythology about someone drowning because they were so in love with their own reflection that they saw it in the water and they tried to, like, they was like, oh my God, I'm so beautiful, I'm so amazing, and they ended up drowning because of their own. I swear I heard that. Like, I want to say it was Narcissus, but I don't know. Like, that's a character and mythological thing I know nothing about. But obviously, much like the creature from last episode, Omen is something that it's like only like a rumor thing that Harry's like, honestly, this thing, he predates like ancient civilization. Like, the fact is, we don't know anything about him. The fact is that even the Book of Shadows won't have any answers about this. So it's like yet another creature that kind of predates what the magical world is aware of, because I think it's only like his name is known but nothing else is known about him. But essentially he entrances women and he basically has them hurt the people they love, because it's like, your love for me, I want you to love me, let me be all that that matters to you, I'm all that you have, so I need you to sacrifice in my name. It's sacrifice in the name of your love for me. And obviously the first person is Julie, and about to run over her boyfriend, Jason. And, it's actually really sad. And what's really interesting, too, is, like, the moment people break from his spell, because it turns out, like, he feeds off of their love for him, and he actually feeds off kind of the life force created from that, their obsession with him, that I guess the moment the spell broke, he could feel it, because it's like, wait, there's someone out there that loved me once that doesn't love me like that again. And it's like, yeah. So luckily, the Charmers were able to get to Julie, and it was interesting because I think Maggie was able to kind of connect to her on a level because of, I think her powers as an empath kind of gave her a very interesting connection and insight to Julie, and was able to kind of use her reflective movements as a means of trying to get through her, like, kind of break through the spell that she was under, and was luckily able to. I also love their cover of, like, oh, we're archaeologists who study supernatural anomalies? I was like, okay. So just kind of like, oh, I thought you guys would think I'm crazy. I was like, nah. But it was surprising when Macy ended up falling under Omen Spell. But I thought it was pretty interesting how, it's like, luckily Macy was able, her connection to her sisters, like, was able to kind of pull her out of that darkness, and she was able to fight them off. And the combination of her and Mel kind of turning the potion into a mirror that he kind of ends up entrancing himself in. Because the whole point was, like, wasn't it like they said, like, the story was like Artemis used the particular, like, did they ever, well, because when I think Artemis, I think of like an archer, so I don't know if Artemis from like mythology or whatever naturally was an archer or not, but I was thinking like maybe like arrows from the wood tree or whatever, but it's like they end up using like this sap. I don't know if they explained how Artemis necessarily killed Narcissus in the mythology, whether it was kind of an arrow situation or was it specifically the sap like they were using, because obviously the Book of Shadows like was a potion made from like the sap, so it's like I don't know if it was the same thing from the mythology or whether just something they like that exists magically was just the sap itself, and maybe not the tree wouldn't. I'd assume the tree would have the same properties. Regardless, I'm thinking too much about it. I just I like I said, I don't think they explain how Artemis necessarily did it. Whether it was like a similar sap situation or whether it was like, oh, like I said, I'm just assuming because I associate Artemis with Archer, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Regardless. And that's also like how Omen died made me think like, isn't that how Narcissus died in the mythology? Must not be, because they didn't necessarily reflect being like, oh, right, that's how Narcissus died. So that's what kind of gave me an idea to turn the U into a mirror. So I just thought that was interesting. Another interesting angle to this was the fact is because this whole situation went a little crazy because there were other people that were put on their Omen Spell as well that were hurting their significant others, maybe killing them, but which actually is kind of sad because we don't know if those situations were ever resolved. Like Julie got saved, her and Jason's situation, because luckily Harry wiped their memories of everything, but still, the video's out there, so that's like, how do you really handle that? I guess it's just kind of like that's on like specific, like a specific website or app or whatever for like stuff like that. So it's like beyond that, I don't know how far widespread enough that would be for it to come back in Julie's life. But regardless, this is a continuation of that element of the magical world bleeding over into reality, where it's like, oh, this is a magical problem that no one's going to realize it's a magical problem. Like I said, that's an element in season 1. It only was an element in season 2 because of the faction wanting to make magic their own, but kind of having to cover up like magical events to be like, I mean, luckily the original Charm ones had Daryl to like cover things up, to be like, don't ask too many questions about this. It's like, oh, the police are investigating, we can skew this a little bit to, and even obviously that eventually took its toll and led to complications in the original show. So it's like they don't really have anyone in there. I guess the closest thing they have is Harry potentially wiping people's memories. That was kind of the solution in season 1, but it's like even that's not going to be a permanent solution, because it seems like they're probably going to start making this more of a widespread thing, at least on this, because there's that dude who is like, it's like, oh, he's a conspiracist person, is thinking like, oh, this is like alien mind control that was going on here. And even later on, that's what made Maggie say like, we have to take her with us because these might be people who are alien investigators, and they're like, we have no idea what they'll do if they think, oh, she's been controlled by aliens, like what they'll do to her, plus what the cops will do, because they'll just assume like, oh, they'll arrest her without, we're the only ones that know about the magical world, so this is a magical world situation that's happening to a human, so we have to be the one to kind of resolve it. So interestingly enough, that dude, obviously, interesting enough, CW wise, obviously he's been in Supernatural, which is also interesting because who else was he in Supernatural with? Erica Serra, who he was, because he played Vincent in Eureka, which she was in Eureka, which, interesting enough, like, she was also in the 100, and the actor who played Antonio was also in the 100, because she played, at least I think that's the same actor. It looks like it's him. I could be mistaken. But she played Allie and Rebecca. It's one of those things I get like in my own head about. I'm like, oh, just like connecting the dots from connecting an actor from a particular show to another. Like, I always just kind of do that a lot of times. I do apologize. It was just kind of interesting when you break that down and think about it. I was like, oh, that was interesting. But regardless of the large tangent I was going on, the point I was making, or trying to make at least before I went on that huge tangent, was that might be an element we see continue on about conspiracy theorists, and that might draw a little more attention to the magical world. You might be getting the wrong people kind of drawing attention, and that might lead to like some bad stuff happening later on, because obviously they just dealt with the faction. Regular conspiracy theorist people drawing too much attention to the magical world could kind of expose a lot of stuff. I like I said, it could just be dangerous, because it could turn into a situation of, hey, someone's magical and we don't know who's human and who's something else. Like, it can turn into one of those nasty type of situations, kind of a discriminatory situation, that if that's the direction they're going to go, we don't know. I just feel like they brought that up this episode, not just for the sake of Julie and all this Omen stuff, but I'm wondering, is that going to be an angle we see kind of continue down the road the rest of the season? I think that'd be an interesting angle of kind of bringing like obviously a more modernized, like, you know, because the internet's so vast and how quickly things can go viral, especially strange and crazy stuff, and you get a lot of strange and crazy when you include the magical world. So I think that could definitely play a role in the story of the season. But like I said, we'll have to ultimately wait and see. But I thought an element of this was really interesting too, is kind of, like I said, finding your own rhythm and kind of finding your own voice. When dealing with a demon that basically takes away your voice, takes away your own, who you are, and kind of makes you obsessed with him. It's like, you know, the Charm One's kind of like, you know, it's like, you know, we're able to kind of find our own voice when it comes to the magical world. Like, how are we not able to do that in the our normal lives? And Mel was like, maybe we can. Our voices are there. We just have to kind of, you know, listen to them. So Mel confronts the dean about the book situation of like, yeah, so much has changed since then. Like, a book by someone who's transgender, like, from their personal experiences, could hold a lot more value than something that is written by someone who doesn't understand that struggle and who has never been in that position, and is also writing from an outside perspective. It's in particular from a book years old. So there's that whole thing. Granted, the dean was like, oh, well, you've made your voice heard. I'm like, she doesn't seem like she appreciates that. I'm sure Mel's probably going to suffer ramifications for that. Like, it didn't seem like the dean liked her being, like, didn't seem like she liked being challenged. We'll see whether that ends up being the case or not. But obviously it's more important for Mel, especially because Kevin was like, yeah, because of our last discussion, my roommate, like, actually apologized. So, you know, yes, it's not nothing amazing. It's something that should be basic, but, you know, it's progress. So there's that. Macy kind of got called out by Swan early in the episode because it's like, I've got more important things to focus on. But for Swan, it's like, this place can be so much for so many people. It isn't just like the stuff, like some of the, like, oh, like the small stuff about like, oh, some food supply stuff, or just like, oh, we don't have this particular thing and this particular person's trying to like bulk up the price of like us getting like a vendor we get like drinks or something from, like the smaller stuff. It's like, that's not what's important. Like, the fact is that we want this to be a safe space for so many people, like a place for the community. And, you know, she kind of called Macy out for it. And like, if you're not down for it, if you're not carpe diem, then hand it over to someone who is. I thought what she was going to do is like, you know what? You should be the one to take care of things, Swan. Might eventually get down that route, because even, you know, Macy was saying like, how did Julian handle all this? But Maggie was like, he most likely hired someone to handle all things. So it was like it was his, but he delegated it to other people, and I think that's what we're going to see Macy do, which she didn't necessarily. But I think she's letting Swan know, like, you're right. This needs to be a safe space for a lot of people. That this is a community that we have to look out for. So I'm assuming she's going to make Swan her, like, on the floor person of, like, when I'm kind of not there able to do bigger things, like, I trust your decision making and your discretion to handle a lot of stuff. Seems like that's where they're heading. But like I said, I would have expected her to hand it over completely, but maybe it's a situation where I'd say Maggie again, I keep doing it. Macy isn't in a position where she can necessarily hand it off, you know? Because also, it's like, because I was about to say, she also needs the place too, because as Mel says, it also presents them an opportunity to have full access to the command center whenever they want to, instead of just kind of having, because initially they had to work there to kind of like having an excuse to like get in and out. But now it's like, well, if Macy kind of owns some place, that kind of, you have a way around that. So I'm guessing she's not going to give it up anytime soon. Like I said, probably just delegate a lot of stuff to Swan or other people. So that's definitely going to be interesting on that front. I didn't talk about it a lot, but obviously, you know, Harry and Jordan went off investigating some of the symbols. It turns out he said Abby's book was a little bit of a bust because, hey, witches aren't too keen on someone showing up. And as an analogy, he used, like, you know, an ex-boyfriend showing up to save them. You know, it's like, for him, it's like a lot of people he tried to track down turned him away, understandably so. So things aren't necessarily going to work on that front for him. Once again, we still haven't touched on what's up with the Abby thing, and you know, but Jordan's willing to help Harry. Once again, Harry's got his issues of, like, he feels old, but at the end of the day, you know, Jordan made him realize, like, all you can do is be you, because Macy loves you for you, so you kind of don't have to change. And it's like, because he's kind of feeling like, oh, because he feels like this is a circumstance that's out of his wheelhouse. Like, this is stuff they're tackling that he knows nothing about. And it's like, as a white lighter, his job is to protect him. And he's like, I feel like I'm failing that recently. But it's like, only you know what you know. And that is an invaluable asset to the Charmed Ones. So they, at the end of the day, they trust Harry to look out for them no matter what. And I also thought this was an interesting thing of, like, it ended up bonding both Harry and Jordan. I thought was pretty nice, kind of bringing those characters closer together. So, once again, just kind of you do you. And Harry telling Jordan to do the same thing. We see that at the end, he kind of takes off the tie. It's just like, I'm just going to be me. I'm not going to try to approach that. Like I said, we see that with everyone. Circling even to Maggie, her thesis is a kind of about helping people through their trauma through movement, which I think that's interesting because it also sets up the thing of, like, there's no surefire way of, like, healing anything, like, because different people will respond to things differently, so there's never always a surefire cure for everybody, because, like, everyone's body everyone might respond to something differently. Even recovering from trauma is like, everyone is different, and the way we heal from something, even like trauma, can, people need to be handled differently. So I thought it was kind of interesting how they're setting up, like, what her thesis about this whole thing is going to be. So I thought that was kind of fascinating in its own right. But obviously, with this all being said and done, they're still not 100% closer to figuring out, what's the connection between these monsters and the allergy, where are they coming from and why now. Obviously, my thought last episode is this has got to be connected to, like, obviously what they did, bringing the source back together. And once again, we saw that creature at the end of the last episode, which I thought might be the source. And like I said, maybe I get the feeling like these are all totem pieces to, like, fully, not just totem pieces, but or just pieces in general, totem pieces, chess pieces, or whatever, to unlocking, like, its full potential. Like, maybe a lot of its power is sealed away. I mean, like I said, and especially because every time each one of them dies, they leave behind a symbol. Like, these symbols have to be seals. Like, the comparison I made last episode is to Supernatural. Lucifer getting free, you had to break, 66 seals? I think one in, like, 66 of, like, 666, something like that. You had to break a certain amount of them so that Lucifer could get out of his cage. Maybe the same thing applies to the source. And that's my current still running theory about what this is all about. Like I said, I think they awoke, like, either in a time that magic was down, it opened the gateway for all this stuff that might have been potentially sealed away long, long time ago. Or maybe it was specifically bringing the source back together that kind of ignited this spark in its own right. We'll ultimately have to wait and see, but it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.